In 2025, Afreximbank secured affirmations from GCR Africa, CCXI China, and JCR Japan, a notable achievement given Africa's ongoing debt restructurings, tighter global liquidity, and recent downgrades by Fitch and Moody's. These ratings not only reflect confidence in the bank's resilience, but also enhance Africa's financial credibility by enabling Afreximbank to raise lower cost, longer tenor capital for trade and infrastructure. The strengthened credit profile allows Afreximbank to scale its support for African-specific priorities, including the AfCFTA, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, and the $10 billion Adjustment Fund, all aimed at driving intra-African trade and industrialization. Joining us to discuss Afreximbank's credit rate success is Dr. Mutize, lead expert, country support on rating agencies, Africa Union. Good morning, and you're most welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Excellent.
So tell us, what does it mean for Africa when a respected institution like Afreximbank secures AAA stable from CCXI and A- stable from JCR?
No, thank you. This is a very important conversation, especially to put these perspectives and benchmarks on the radar of international investors who make decisions to bring money to Africa. So to put it in context, you know that we had a very strong statement against the rating downgrade of Afreximbank by Fitch, which also Moody's followed suit a few weeks after. But the main point of contention was that we thought that rating downgrade by Fitch was not warranted. And we still think that that position was not correct. So what these rating affirmations by those three rating agencies that you correctly mentioned, CCXI, which is the leading rating agency partly owned by Moody's in China, and the Japan Credit Rating Company, which is also the leading rating agency in Japan, and lastly GCR, which is partly owned by or fully owned now by Moody's, and the largest rating agency in Africa in terms of rating portfolio. Those A-class or A-grade ratings by those three institutions affirm the position that we are advancing, that the rating downgrades on the basis of fundamentals that Fitch was flagging, especially because Fitch is the one that moved to right on the fence with a BBB- with also a negative outlook on Afreximbank, which we thought was really an incorrect position of analysis of risk and also very speculative in nature.
Well, Dr. Mutize, as an academic observing regional integration, how do these ratings tangibly empower intra-African trade? Major issue, intra-African trade.
Very important, because, you know, for intra-African trade to happen, one of the bloodlines of that is capital. You need capital to flow in Africa. And one of the major needs that is agent to support inter-African trade is the infrastructure to facilitate such trade, to open the routes and develop the necessary infrastructure for trade to flow. So if that capital is not available, it means that we can't talk about inter-African trade growth, because we need the capital to support these infrastructure. And we have always been saying that the traditional financing sources or institutions, they are not interested to facilitate capital flow into those specific areas where we need to develop the necessary infrastructure for inter-African trade. And institutions like Afreximbank has been one of the key institutions to facilitate such trade. That's why you hear a lot of reference of Afreximbank in the African Union platform, because it's one of the institutions that is believed in the African Union ecosystem, that it has heed the call to support financing for development in Africa. And this specific factor instead of being viewed in positive light by the international financing architecture, it is rather seen from a negative perspective, which we consistently challenge now because Afreximbank has made an impact which is undeniable. And to downgrade Afreximbank, we actually see it in the broader perspective of wanting to curtail the facilitation and the strategic role that this institution is taking in financing Africa's infrastructure.
Let's talk about the panda bonds. What does this say about Africa and Asia financial ties?
Well, I think if you are well aware, you acknowledge that Afreximbank is one of the institutions that has opened the door for accessing into the Japanese market and also the Chinese market to diversify its funding portfolio. And we have seen also a follow through from a number of countries. I'm sure they've followed that Kenya recently announced that it will be working to swap its current Eurobonds that are denominated in dollars into the Chinese yuan. And that is expected that it will halve its interest burden. So moving into this space, we know that it was not because of the financing need for the bank, but it was rather to display capacity and possibility that it has the skill, it has also the capacity into moving into alternative markets to raise capital. I'm sure you would have noted also that the recent rating reports actually acknowledge that as a key strength because there are available lines of credit over 2 billion that the bank has not utilized, which speaks to a huge capacity there that displays that the bank has got a few options other than the traditional channels of financing.
All right, thank you very much. So how does this reinforce academic theories of South-South finance innovation?
Well, it's right at the center of this, because I'm sure you know that now in the recently concluded Financing for Development Conference, the major theme was re-architecturing the financing ecosystem of the globe. So this ecosystem has made financing for development very, very difficult because of what we are discussing here, that you find Fitch doesn't see the support that a bank like Afreximbank is getting from the member states. Even the preferred creditor treatment that the member states are affording to the entity, as well as the commitment in terms of callable capital is to such a huge amount as 4.6 billion, which is quite a lot of commitment from the shareholders. They don't see those values is important. And what they do emphasize is what they flag as weak risk management, which is, I think, a very speculative and superlative approach to analyze risk, and also the issue of liquidity and capital and the average rating of shareholders, which the Afreximbank has displayed that it can actually be transferred into third-party positions because of various structural instruments that it can use to transfer such risk. So these are the fundamentals that the traditional financing structures are not recognizing and are not willing to accept. So when we are talking about South to South, which the alternative markets like the Samurai bond and the Chinese market, the Panda bond, have provided a very lucrative alternative. If you may, you would have noted that Egypt actually issued a very reasonably priced loans of both denominations at an interest rate of between 1% and 3%. So that speaks to, if you compare that to the traditional Eurobonds, where now you find a country issuing a bond at 12%. That speaks to the possibilities and the need to refocus and shift into this space for sustainable financing.
So, Dr. Mutize, what role do you see Afreximbank playing in realizing the African Continental Free Trade Agenda from a development finance perspective?
Well, I think Afreximbank has been very instrumental. It's already playing that role. And the reason why I think it is being talked about more is because of its increasing relevance into the equation of financing for Africa. You would have recognized that almost every year in the policy organs to do with economic development and planning, there's always a decision by ministers of finance, African multilateral financing institution, being led by Afreximbank because of its increased role in supporting financing into specific areas where traditional financing sources see as highly risky. That's why we're also challenging the notion that African multilaterals like Afreximbank should be treated as commercial lenders, which is not correct, because if you see the trains and the facilities that the bank offers to various projects, including infrastructure and trade beyond Africa, you can easily see that the bank has got characteristics and its manner of operation cannot come anywhere near commercial lending. So we, I think, see the importance of Afreximbank as a market leader in restoring the confidence of investors in African infrastructure development and also African trade. So as part of our strategy also in the African Union, I'm sure you understand that we are supporting the development of domestic markets and developing institutions also that will reinforce the domestic financing ecosystem. So we see Afreximbank and other African multilateral financial institutions as very important to support this idea of developing an African financing architecture.
Are there any risks or government caveats that you deem important to point out? And why did Fitch and Moody take a different stance with their respective downgrades?
Well, I think it was very clear. The issue that was contested there, in fact, maybe two issues in summary. The first one was the treatment of what they called non-performing loans in Afreximbank. And they did flag loans to Ghana and to Zambia as well as Sudan, which, if they are included in their definition of non-performing loans, it pushed the non-performing loans into a higher threshold. But what we're contesting is that in accounting those loans, the bank had disclosed that it had applied the International Financing Reporting Standards, which Fitch rejected and said it doesn't recognize that approach, but rather it applies its own. So our contestation was that its own methodology or approach cannot supersede what International Financing Reporting Standards have laid out, which Afreximbank had followed. And then it went on to also create an impression that the bank had weak disclosure mechanism and had weak risk management policies, which was very speculative and had no basis at all because these loans had been disclosed and the status of it, including the preferred creditor treatment from the countries that were being questioned. It was all laid to the rating agency, which they completely rejected. So that's what we're contesting. And this impression that the bank operates in a highly risky environment, that notion is completely speculative because there is a very low non-performing loans or defaults that has happened in the past.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. And congratulations again. We look forward to hearing more positive stories such as this from Afreximbank.